Hi, here we go.
I got a baby blown over with a demon inside, yeah.
Mad Tech Industries, the official Cerakoter for Therapy Range.
What is up, everybody? I'm Paul Riley, and this is Therapy Range. Tonight, I want to bring a very special guest on. His name's Anthony Hudson. He's running for the President of the United States out of Michigan as an independent write-in candidate. We're going to have him on here for about 45 minutes. I got a whole slew of questions that I want to get through and try to ask as many of them as we possibly can. So I'm not going to dilly-dally too long with all this stuff. We're going to give Anthony an opportunity to briefly introduce yourself to us, and then we're going to dive into these questions. I've got about 15 or 17 of them, so we're going to try to rapid fire through this and not keep the man up, because this guy, unlike creepy Joe Biden, who's never actually had an actual paycheck drawing job in his entire life, this guy actually has to get up tomorrow morning and go drive a truck and keep his life moving forward while running for president of the United States, while traveling across, 18 states, 22 states?
22 states already this year.
Yeah, so I'm going to stop with them. Yeah, Anthony, tell us who you are, and you let me know when you're ready for questions.
All right. Well, first off, thanks for having me on your show tonight. We have a mutual friend in Jason Davis who introduced me to your platform. I'm going to be going to an event that he has coming up in Arkansas in 2 weeks, less than 2 weeks. And we're going to give a big speech there about our veterans, our first responders, and our support for the Second Amendment. And remind me a little bit later, because we're going to make history on this trip down to Arkansas. And remind me to tell you how we're going to make history. But I'm going to do something that no other presidential candidate has ever done in the history of the United States. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. But as far as me, I'm an average blue collar guy. I'm a grassroots guy. I was born and raised in Central Texas. I now live in Michigan. I'm a father. I've been a baseball coach. I own a small trucking company. I literally am no different than you or anybody watching this show tonight. The only difference, if there is one, is that I'm fed up with all the talking about politics and how the left is wrong and the right is wrong, and let's blame the Democrats for this and let's blame the Republicans for that. And I'm tired of us, the people, constantly voting in the wrong people into office, and nobody wants to stand up and do anything about it. So on July 8th of last year, 2022, I stood up and said, I'm going to put my name in the hat. I'm going to stop talking or complaining, and I'm going to stand up and start doing. And I put my paperwork together. I filed with the FEC on August 18th of last year. I was approved as a presidential candidate for 2024, and I have been off and running ever since. We've been to 22 states this year alone. We've spent 15 days on the southern border. I've seen everything from drugs coming in, weapons coming in, criminals coming in, just all the way to your average people who are seeking asylum, who are seriously running from something. And it was an eye-opening experience. We've been to Kentucky, where we helped out with the flooding last year in Hazard County, Kentucky, not the Dukes of Hazzard, but Hazard County, Kentucky. And we helped out almost 1,500 families there. And Joe Biden decided to fly in for about 45 minutes, wave his hand, take a picture, and leave, and cost the American taxpayers almost $40 million. I was there for 5 days and spent less than $1,000. Less than $1,000. We were knee deep in the mud. We were feeding stray animals. We were pitching tents for those who had lost their homes. We were giving out food and water. Like, we were driving up the mountain in my pickup, loaded down with supplies, just handing them out to people and listening to their stories and what they went through. And it was horrifying. And a few months later, earlier this year in March, Mississippi got hit with a tornado. Well, me and my staff, my crew, we drove down to Mississippi. We were helping out. We were distributing supplies again. And then that night, it was a Friday night, Little Rock, Arkansas got hit by a tornado. So Saturday morning, we drove over to Little Rock, got on scene, got on people's houses, on the roofs, cutting down trees, cleaning up driveways, fixing garage doors. And I started realizing that that's where I feel that I am a much better candidate than Tim Scott or Ron DeSantis or Vivek Ramaswamy, because I'm not afraid to get out there and help the American people when they struggle. And if you want a leader, you need to be willing to get out there and get your boots dirty. You need to lead by example, not by luxury. So we've spent a lot of time this year helping out those who were in distress or who have lost everything that they've owned because of tornadoes or flooding or hurricanes, what have you. And it's really resonated with the people because they seem to relate to someone who gets up and goes to work. They relate to someone that comes out there when other people are struggling and offers their time to help. And that's kind of been our focus right now, is getting across the country, meeting as many people as we can, helping where we can, and speaking at public appearances as often as we can. And to date, we have spoken in front of a little more than 61 million people since August of last year. So we've done something right. And now with your help and your platform, we want to get out to more people to let them know that you have another option. You have a blue collar candidate that believes in the people, that puts people before politics and strives to make life better for each and every one of us. Whether you hate me or like me, my goal is to give you a better quality of life in this country. And I think that we've tailor-made some policies that will do that for the American people, rather than mimicking Joe Biden and turning our back against him, against the people, and just kind of doing whatever it is he wants to do. I don't think that that's an example of leadership. I think Joe Biden should be in just as much trouble as Trump, but that's my opinion, and I'm going to hold on to it.
Well, everybody's entitled to their opinions, but as we well know, opinions are much like rear ends. They typically stink.
Yeah, and we've all got one.
Yeah, the people that are watching the show right now, they're all like, oh, wow, he didn't cuss. Paul can be civilized. Yes, as a matter of fact, Paul can be civilized. He just chooses to be a little rough around the edges because that's what works for me. What works for me may not work for everyone else. And we're talking about a guy that's trying to run for president of the United States. So we absolutely want to put the best foot forward to any and all people that would be watching. So let's jump into these questions. I've got quite a few of them laid out here. We might not get to all of them, but let me throw you a nice easy one, man. We're gonna throw you a softball here.
Okay.
So you said that you own your own trucking company. How do you feel that running a small business is going to be of any benefit when you come in comparison to the largest business in the country, which is the United States of America? How is what you've learned from being a small business owner going to benefit you or hinder you in that situation?
You know, I think a lot of it is just being able to communicate with people, be honest, be upfront, and know what the end game is. You don't go into a contract with a customer without knowing what you want out of it. What are both parties going to get from it, and what's the end game? What does it look like, once everything's done? And I think for me in the trucking industry, I meet all types of people, all kinds of people all over the country, whether it's a CEO in a glass office that needs a new LTL carrier, or I meet truck drivers at truck stops, or guys driving high lows, or lumpers that are trying to rush through and get a trailer unloaded. It's all about being able to be personable. It's about being able to be upfront and approachable, and being able to talk to these people on their level and understand what our common interest is here. Business is business. I don't care if it's a trucking company with 5 trucks, or it's running the United States of America, the business that is the United States of America. Business is business, and the logistics behind it operate very similar. And when it comes to running the country, you've got to be a presence to the people. The Constitution starts, we the people. In order to lead the people. You have to be a part of the people. You have to come from the people and know how to talk to them and listen to what they need. It's time to stop telling people what they have to have and start asking them what they want. And once we can do that and actually listen, then we can keep the wheels turning, and we can start putting policies together that are going to help the American people. So I think small business, big business, it's all about the people involved being able to communicate, talk, be honest, be yourself, be upfront, and don't give up. Be persistent. Go after your dreams. Go after what it is you want. If it's that big account that's gonna put a lot of money in your pocket at the end of each week, don't give up because they tell you no once. If I gave up because people told me no, I couldn't be president, you and I wouldn't be sitting here talking right now. You have to keep pushing forward. And I think that's part of being professional and understanding how the infrastructure of business actually works.
Fair enough. All right, next question. Let me get this pulled up here. Do you believe executive orders are a political tool to help or just a way for one man to circumvent our members of Congress?
I think it depends on the man that's writing the executive order. If you're writing executive orders to push your will because Congress won't do it in a vote, they won't pass it in a vote, then I think that's an abuse of power. But if you're writing an executive order because you honestly believe that it's going to help the American people, then I think it's justified. And I'll tell you, one of the executive orders that I would write would be that all overtime hours are to be tax exempt for everyone in the United States of America. Overtime hours tax exempt, and for the businesses who pay the payroll on overtime, they would be tax exempt on the payroll taxes for the overtime hours. That is an executive order that I think helps the American people. Congress would never pass it. And if you write an executive order and it's not unconstitutional, Congress can't touch it. And this is one of those where you really fulfill your tax obligations on your first 40 hours. Anything above and beyond that, that's why they pay you time and a half for every hour worked over 40. But then they also want to tax you at like 47%, 49% for the overtime. We're going to do away with that. We're going to make it so that those who spend more time at work and away from their families and their children, they're going to be able to keep that money in their pocket, tax-free, no loopholes, no restrictions. If you work 80 hours a week, you're going to get 40 hours of time and a half in your pocket and without paying taxes. And that money's going to, that's going to be able to help you get over this hump that we currently have with gas prices and grocery costs and the electric bill and all these things that keep skyrocketing. Having this extra cash without paying the taxes on it will help you pay those things, which in turns helps give you that better quality of life we spoke of earlier.
And see, while I would be willing to argue and debate of why executive orders are unconstitutional in and of themselves, I believe that even the die-hardest constitutionalist could be convinced into understanding that if executive orders were used only in the sense of reeling in powers of the government by relieving the strain on the people, by removing those extra tax burdens for working harder, for being more productive instead of making you pay more for doing more, I think you would be hard pressed to find a conservative that would be like, yeah, no, I want to pay those taxes. I don't think, you know what I'm saying? No, let me keep paying 49%. And I think that would be my biggest problem with executive orders is that in my lifetime, I've seen them used and abused more than they were ever really used for righteous purposes. Right. For one man to have the power to circumvent Congress, to circumvent that whole thing about only Congress shall write law. That kind of reminds me of a dictatorship. But then again, if it was used in a righteous purpose, if it was never soiled by the evil in man's heart, and executive orders were only used, like you're talking about, to relieve the strain and burden on the American people, I think you would find a lot more people willing to overlook the fact that there's actually no constitutional provision covering an executive order.
Right. And
Let's
I
go on
think
to the next question.
I think just to piggyback on that real quick, I think if you're using the executive order to go over Congress for the betterment of the people, then I think you're doing it in the right fashion, because Congress is very selfish and there's a lot
I
of
would have to
corruption.
say that would be very limited in my scope of willingness to tolerate that, just simply for the fact that, that's the legislative body. That's the way everything was intended to work. We're able to just reach out to our congressmen, our senators, our representatives, where the president himself is out of reach of the common man like me or you. I can't just pick up the phone and call. I can't email him. I can't write him a letter. Whereas my congressman here in Ohio, I can show up at the state house. If I call and schedule an appointment, I can go up to the state house and have a sit down meeting with my congressman. I
I've met
can't do
one of
that
your
with the
congressmen.
president.
I met one of your congressmen this year.
Yeah, I'm not real proud of Ohio's congressman, but it's still better than Michigan.
Yeah, no, it's much better than Michigan.
All right. Well, we ain't going to beat a dead horse on that. The best part about being an American is having the ability to agree and disagree on things and not be upset about it. So while we may not see every single thing eye to eye, again, I think that it would be hard pressed to find conservatives that would argue that argument with you. We all are very well on the same page that we're taxed to death.
We are.
Next question. What would be the first Biden policy that you would do away with if you were to somehow win the presidency?
After I proved to the American people that I could ride a bicycle and run up and down the steps to Air Force One, I would reverse his very first executive order. And I would reopen the pipeline and get that back under construction, because we need to be energy independent, and we need the United States. It's a proven fact. Anybody listening can Google this. The United States is the #1 producer of crude oil in the world. We have enough oil to be, independent when it comes to our own.
Well, and just to prove a point on that, though, under the whole Trump administration, if I recall, didn't the price of oil drop below zero? Because
I'm not sure if it went below zero or not, but I know I was paying less than $1.40 at the pump. And now
there was a period in time, and during the Trump administration, before COVID hit, that the price of a barrel of crude oil had dropped below zero. Like, it was in the negative at that point for a short window. And that was the cheapest that we had seen gas since we were kids, since we had just started driving. We're like, woohoo, this is awesome.
Yeah, we were.
It's because America was pumping more crude. Right. America was pumping more crude out of the ground than we had since, the Nixon had been president. I mean, the oil pumps just fired up and was going and going and going. And that drove the overall cost of crude oil down, because there was not enough demand to use every barrel that was coming out of the ground.
Well, there's so many positives to fracking and digging. One, we're not paying Iran for their oil, and we know what Iran's doing right now with Hamas in Jerusalem, or Israel and the Gaza Strip. Why are we, the American government, working out deals with terrorist countries in the first place? Our money is going to them so that they can build nuclear weapons. We need to keep our money, our resources here in the United States. In 1776, we became an independent nation. Why don't we become it? Why don't we get back to being an independent nation? We rely so heavily on China and Iran, Saudi Arabia, at one point Russia, for oil, when we have enough here. We are the biggest hypocrites in the world, because we tell the American people it's bad for the climate, it's bad for the atmosphere, it's bad for all of these things if we dig our oil here. But we tell Iran, go ahead, we're going to pay you good money. You can dig it there. Saudi Arabia, you can dig it there. Do we not realize that we all live under the same climate in this world? I mean, what happens here can affect them there. What happens over there can affect us here eventually. Case in point, you see a hurricane come off the coast of Africa. Where do they go 90% of the time? Toward Florida. And we get that weather. It affects us here, something that started over there. Same thing with the oil. We can dig here. And once we start fracking and start producing oil and reopening our refineries, we can cut the inflation down, because a big heartbeat of inflation is the fact that it costs so much to deliver products anywhere in the country, from the farmer's fields to the grocery store, from the refineries to the gas stations, clothes that are being made to ship them across the country. It's so expensive now because of the cost of diesel. And this is what I know for a fact. I put $300 worth of fuel in my truck today just to drive 500 miles. $300 to drive 500 miles. Used to, I could put $1.50, half of that, $1.80 in my truck and drive 500 miles, and then make a decent living off of it. Now I go out and I make $900 today, and $300 right off the top goes straight to my fuel. And then the consumer pays more at the store because the truck drivers and the brokers are charging more money to have it delivered, because we have to incorporate our cost for our fuel. That's a problem. If we get that down, what about the trains that are using diesel? Get back to fracking, use our coal mines, burn our coal, and start, getting used to the idea of renewable energy again, and just make this country an energy independent country like we were before, and we can get rid of inflation. Everybody can go back to being able to put money in their savings account for a change, instead of charging everything on a credit card and going into debt, not knowing if they're ever going to get it paid off.
Right. I mean, I'm all for green energy, but it's going to be a slow process that we walk into. It's not going to be next week. It's going to be
a slow process, but you can't force it on people.
Right.
When you live in a free country. When you're a free
That's
citizen,
debatable.
I cannot tell you that you have to buy an electric car. You have options. It's your money. You should be able to spend it on what you want to spend it on. The government should not ever be able to tell us that we have to buy an electric car. And if that's the case, then the government needs to front the bill for those cars and for the batteries when they go out, because we just can't afford them. $80,000, $70,000. We can't afford to do that.
Not only that, but I don't want it. I just
simply
don't want it. When you start doing the math on it, you can only get about 300 to 400 miles out of a charge. Well, I don't want a trip to Florida to be 4 days.
Right. Because
I want to be able to drive to Florida in 15 hours, 17 hours, whatever it takes to drive from Ohio to Florida. And I want to be able to do it in that time. If I've got to take 4 days to do it, then I might as well take the plane. Oh, guess what? It don't run on batteries.
No, it doesn't. The thing is these charging ports, what does it take to charge a car? 45 minutes? An hour?
The one that I read for the full Ford full-size pickup was like 12 hours to charge it.
Wow. And it takes me about 7 minutes.
You got to get a hotel room.
Not only can I get almost 700 miles to a tank of gas in my Dodge Ram, and it's a full-size Dodge Ram, but it takes me 7 minutes to fill it up to get back on the road, and I'll go another 700 miles.
Right.
These cars, they're made for people who don't travel.
Well, and for the last 30 years, they've been cracking down on emissions on them. Dude, these cars are running cleaner than they've ever run in the history of gas engines or diesel engines, combustion engines.
Do, but it's not. This whole clean energy thing has got to be a world platform, not the United States. China is the biggest pollutant in the world, and they are doing nothing about climate control. Neither is Egypt. Neither is Japan. Neither is Russia. These other countries cannot rely on the United States and our tax dollars to save the climate. It's got to be the world working together to do it. And this whole Bidenomics climate change thing, it's a joke. The billions and billions of dollars that they've sent to climate control. I just want to call up Mother Nature and ask her if she's gotten the checks yet, because it's still cold in Michigan in the wintertime, and it's still hot in Texas in the summertime. We just had Category 4.
It drove me
hurricane.
insane all summer long, man. They were talking about this epic heat wave. They're like, it's 120 degrees in Death Valley. And I'm like, it's Death Valley.
Well, where is this money going is my concern, because Mother Nature, we know, is about as visible as Lady Liberty herself, right? So,
right, she don't have a GoDaddy.
We're not changing
anything.
It's not changing anything. The electric cars, the green energy, all this stuff, it's not changing a thing, except for we are paying more money in climate control, and I don't see the residual. I don't see the back end. I don't see it working. I want to know who's getting rich off of this, who's writing the check for $5 billion. Where is it going and who's cashing it? Because Mother Nature's not cashing it.
Right. I mean, apparently the global warming's continuing to get worse, or at least that's what they're telling me.
I'll tell you, I grew up in Texas, and it was just as hot in 1988 as a kid as it was in 2023 this past summer. The temperatures are comparable. And people are talking about, we got to protect the climate. The climate has been changing since day one, since God made the heavens and the earth. Like a baby, when it's born, it begins to die, right? That's the truth. You begin dying the moment you're born. Climate change has been changing since day one, and it's not going to end in our lifetime or our kids' lifetime or our kids' lifetime. This is something that if we come together as a world and unite as a world and work on this together, we might be able to change the temperatures by a half a degree in 50 years. And that's what the studies show. Harvard did a study that said if everyone in the world drove an electric car, it would change the temperature by half a degree in 47 1/3 years. A half a degree. Now, that doesn't make sense to me. A half a degree.
Good stuff. All right, next question. Are you ready?
I'm here.
All right. Have you read the founding documents? Not just the Declaration of Independence or the Bill of Rights, but have you read the Federalist Papers? Have you deep dived into the writings of John Adams and Thomas Jefferson to fully understand what their vision of America was?
I have not dove into them like I should. I've done some study on John Adams when I went to Boston earlier this year. That Boston's a huge place for John Adams. Went to his burial site, went to his home, did some research on him, understand a little bit about, their vision for this country. But, and this is not an excuse. It is, but it isn't. I work just like you said in the beginning. I put in 50, 60 hours a week. I try to campaign as much as I possibly can. And with those campaign events comes research, and understanding of foreign policy, the border, our schools, what we would do to get rid of some of the overtaxation that we have in this country. I haven't had much time, and I'm not saying I'm not doing it, because we are just not diving into that as much as we probably should, because my attention is pulled in every which direction, kind of like our military, if that makes sense.
Right. All right. Well, we'll move on to the next one then. Immigration is a major issue in America today. Everybody seems to have an opinion on it. You've said in your videos that you would secure the border on day one of your presidency. Would you care to elaborate on how exactly you would go about doing that?
We're going to allow every federal agency along the border to do their job. For one, we have to finish the wall. The wall is not going to stop illegal immigration. It was never intended to stop. It's to be a deterrent. It's to force you to go left or right to get to a legal port of entry in this country. That's what it's supposed to do. And once we get the wall finished so that we don't have these big gaps in Yuma, Arizona, from Yuma, Arizona to San Luis, Arizona, there's a 12-mile gap in the wall, 12 miles. And I've been out there at 4 o'clock in the morning, pitch dark, and I've seen Border Patrol sirens and lights going off because they were trying to drive through the fields to catch the cartel that was coming into the country. My campaign manager, I know he's watching the show right now. He was there with me. We've seen it. You have to fill in those gaps. You have to get military drones in the sky so we can see which direction, where these large groups of people are coming from. And we've got to put infrared cameras up on the wall so that we can monitor a ground level and up in the sky. And we've got to force these people to come to a legal port of entry to come into this country. I feel like we need to have our own private special forces task team that goes in and drives the cartel out of this country. And if they have to use lethal force, they have to use lethal force. But the cartel does not belong in this country. They need to get out. And if we have to chase them into Mexico, we will do it. We have to stop the fentanyl. We have to stop the drugs. We have to stop the terrorists. And we have to stop the criminals from coming into this country just by walking across the river or walking across a dried bank. And that's a problem right now because you'll hear this term sleeper cells on the news of Hamas militants that just come into our country because they look like they're Venezuelans or they look like they're from the Dominican Republic or they look like they come from Haiti. They just blend in and they just walk right into our country. They get their picture taken, they get released, and then you never hear from them again until they get a phone call that says, hey, I need you to go to Chicago and do this, 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 and this. And it's
right. I think it's like 98% of them don't show up for their immigration hearings.
They never come back to their immigration court date. They don't. And that's one of the other policies that we want to write is that when you cross into this country, you are to be kept in that city and held accountable for your court date. If you don't show up, we find you, we deport you immediately. If you're going to come into this country, obey our laws. It's that simple. If you go to Mexico and you break the law, you're going to go to a Mexican jail. And I promise you right now, that's not somewhere you want to go. If you go to Germany and you break the law, you're going to a German jail. And you're not going to want to do that. Or Cuba or Dominican or wherever. Laws are meant to be followed. And the first thing every one of these men, women, and children are doing is breaking a law coming into this country. And that's weakening our national security.
Well, the leftists have changed our vocabularies over the last couple of years. You remember when it used to be called illegal alien, not a migrant, not an immigrant? Yeah. You know, you are illegally in this country. You're not a resident or a citizen of this country. So you're an illegal alien, not a migrant. Okay, there's a difference.
That term, to be honest with you, because that's what I grew up on. There's so many words that I grew up on that are now politically incorrect, and if you say them, you can get in trouble. And Gretchen Whitmer here in Michigan, I hope she's
Gretchen Whitmer is a man. Prove me wrong.
Her and Michael Obama, or whatever. She has written a law that if you use the wrong pronouns to someone.
Mm-hmm.
It's a $10,000 fine and you can go to jail.
Yep, Gretchen Whitmer is a man. Prove me wrong.
Yeah. Oh well, her husband. You know, we can.
And my evidence is look how badly she's effing all the Michiganders.
She's getting the best of all of us right now. But
y'all just getting some.
We PG. No, it's just it's sad that we live in a country where we're trying to figure out our sexual identity and our enemies are building bombs. That's what it comes down to. We are trying to figure out, am I a man or am I a woman?
Well, I mean, it boils down to the old saying, you know, I mean, hard men create good times create soft men create bad times create hard men. We're about to revolve back around that cycle. The pendulum is swinging back the other way. At some point, you know, what hard men are left are going to have to muscle up and push guys like you forward and make better changes, make better choices for America, or otherwise, you're going to find yourself in Great Depression type situations where, people are going to be starving to death. I don't want to see what Venezuela looked like in my own front yard.
I don't want it. I don't want any of it in my own neighborhoods. And unfortunately, there are South Colombian gangs in Michigan that are breaking into people's homes. And where did they come from? They came across the southern border.
Well, I find it problematic that the government is not addressing these situations. I find it problematic that the city officials are not addressing these problems. And I find it even more disturbing that the actual American citizens, the people that have to live on the streets, that these violent crimes, like in the city of Chicago with a crime rate that's just out of this world. I mean, it's reminiscent of a war zone, how many bodies are dropping per day, and that the citizens themselves are still willing to pander to it and not band together and have a show of arms and say, look, if the police aren't going to save us, if the National Guard ain't going to come save us, then it's clearly on us to save us. So I'm really surprised we haven't started seeing that.
There's a lot of people that are on this humanity thing, which in my time at the border, I've seen some rough people come across the border. And I've seen a 7-year-old girl come across by herself. Her mother had abandoned her in the Mexican jungle 30 days earlier, and she walked and ran and came through the jungle by herself at 7 years old. And the father in me says, I just want to pick this girl up and give her a home and raise her and keep a roof over her head and guide her in the right directions like I do my own children. But you can't do that for every single immigrant that comes into this country. And these people are pushing this. Oh, but they're human life. You're racist. I'm not a racist. I'm a realist. And I tell you what, if these immigrants are knocking down your door at 2:00 in the morning to steal your food, your car, your money, and your wife, I guarantee you'll change your tone about how you feel about these migrants just coming across the border unscathed.
No, I mean, a perfect example, I've been using this analogy for quite a while now to prove that, most people are not racist. And it's a good analogy. If you're in the woods, walking through the woods, and you come across a little infant baby of color, any color, it doesn't matter, any color that's not your color. And do you leave the baby or do you help it? Anybody that says that they would leave the baby could potentially be a racist, because, I can't imagine anybody that would leave a baby in that situation. But if you walk through the woods and you come across 5,000 babies, you can't possibly save them all.
You can't save them all. That's when you make a phone call.
Right. You got to call in support. You got to call in help. You got to do something, because you, as an individual, can't help them all. You can't.
And we want to help these people as they come into this country, but we want you to start by coming in the legal way, so we can identify you, we can track you, but we can find out who you are, make sure that you're not running from law enforcement in your own country, and we want to make sure that we can assist you and guide you into the proper steps of becoming a legal American citizen. If you want to stop the illegal migration right now, stop giving them incentives to come here. Stop giving them the cash. Stop giving them the food. Stop allowing them to vote. Stop allowing them to get jobs as police officers or get driver's license to
You
drive.
could start by simply just saying, hey, the doors are closed. Stop advertising that the doors are open.
That's what finishing the wall says, that you're no longer allowed to just.
Well, I've seen interviews with some of these migrants where they've explicitly said that in their nation there's newspaper articles where it says that you can come to America, that they're accepting refugees.
Yep.
Come join us, be a part of the party. Yep. So when they get here and they find out that Americans really don't want them here, they're kind of in a shock like, oh, I thought we were welcome here. I mean, I was led to believe that this is the land of opportunity, that, anybody can just show up and we can start working and live the American dream. And then when they get there, they're like, oh, yeah, it's not actually like that.
That's right. No, I think it just goes back to, we have to secure the border. We have to implement the laws in this country and stop giving them incentives to want to come here. The United States was number 22 last time I checked on the all-time free list. That means there's 21 other countries that are more free than America. Go there and see if they'll let you just walk in. I guarantee you they won't.
So another major issue that's been plaguing America for the last decade or so is the drug addiction in the United States. What do you think that you could do as president to combat the never-ending war on drugs and opioids and fentanyl, and to help keep our prisons from being so overpopulated at the same time? How do we combat this without just simply incarcerating everybody under the sun?
Yeah, this is probably the best question of the night, and I'll tell you this with a very open heart here. We are currently working on this topic in my campaign right now. We have Krista. If she's in here, send a message in the chat, Krista. Krista has been working with 4 other people about prison reform, the drug issues in this country, rehab. What can we do to get Americans to get the help that they need, for one, and not criminalize, not incarcerate people for this type of drug use, because it's an addiction. It's a problem. Is it a crime? Yes, it's a crime. And I just said we got to enforce the law in this country, but we've got to have programs set up where we can allow these folks to come in, little to no money or government-backed money, programs, grants, whatever, to treat them. I don't think taking someone who is overusing and putting them in a jail cell is going to get them to stop using drugs. I think that's more harm than it is good, because then they go into relapse, or not relapse, they withdrawals. They don't get any help while they're in there. It's got to be a nightmare. So we are currently investigating this particular topic to see how we can make prison life better, how we can reform prisons, how we can train our corrections officers more, get them resources in the prisons that are going to help these people rehabilitate. And then we're also trying to figure out what's the best option for getting these people on inpatient therapy on a government level, instead of just arresting them, locking them up, and throwing away the key. I think it's more of a rehabilitation thing than it is a punishment thing, because we all have problems. We all have issues. Mental health is a crisis in this country.
I would like to add my 2 cents into that, since how I've got you on the phone, metaphorically, of course. We need to address this mental health issue that the elephant in the room is the mental health issue. We've got to find the underlying reason why people are doing the things that they're doing. I mean, if you look at the major problems that we're having in our country right now, as far as crime and violence goes, school shootings, mental health issues, mass shootings, mental health issues, drug abuse, in most cases, mental health issues. But for some reason, we can't figure out, the whole chicks with wieners wanting to use the bathroom with our kids, mental health issue. We've got to figure out how to address these mental health issues. I know back when we were kids, back when old Ronnie was running the show, we used to have these little things called asylums, where they would put people that were defective, and they would get treatment and they would get help. And granted, back then it was quite barbaric,
right?
But Ronald Reagan ended those asylums, but there was a need for it. Was there a need for what they had? Yeah, there was a need for a better version of that. There was a need for a cleaner version of that, something with transparency, to where people aren't being abused in the basements of the place, to where people aren't dying and no one's being told about it. As long as there was accountability, there could be institutions. If there was institutions, there would be a place to be able to put the people that clearly have some sort of a mental defect.
But it's
be able
got
to
to
get
be a
treatment.
mental health institution, not a prison.
Right. Not a prison. Not a
There's
prison.
got to be a distinguishing factors that are different from a prison to an institution where they can get help. And as Kevin Duncan, my campaign manager, he's made a couple comments here. We first want to start by extending the VA's short-term mental health program. They only do short terms, like 6 months. That needs to be for life for a veteran. When you sign your name to a dotted line, you're willing to die for your country. Those benefits should be for life, not short term. Then we want to be able to find a way that we can provide mental health services to every American in the country that needs it at no cost. I don't want to charge people to get mental health help when there's something clearly wrong with them.
With all the things that we spend money on frivolously in the United States, being able to take care of some medical costs shouldn't be
even within the United States. It's the money that's going overseas is so mundane. People don't fathom how much money the United States sends overseas. When my administration stops that, we take that money that we're collecting and we reinvest it into the United States and into our problems. We address our problems with our money, and we stop helping other nations who have failed their people. It's not our place to rejuvenate another culture or another government so that they can get a fresh start. No, we have problems here. And until we get a leader, a president that wants to stand up from the people, for the people, and provide the services needed for that better quality of life, we're never going to change. And that's probably one of the most powerful messages I could give to the American people about my campaign is that is my goal. Stop sending the money overseas. Keep it here. We need to back our dollar with gold like we used to do. It's constitutional. You can look it up. We don't spend more than we have. And what we have, we invest in American culture. We invest in the American people. We solve the mental health problems. And if we do that, then we don't have to worry about guns being an issue. To me, I support the Second Amendment 100%. And when I told you
that was my last question.
When I told you we were going to make history in Arkansas, this is what we're going to do. I'm going to be the first presidential candidate to stand on stage wearing a 45 as I give my presidential speech into that crowd. I will walk back and forth fully armed in support of our Second Amendment. We don't need people saying, I support it. We need people to stand up and prove that they are behind the Second Amendment. It is our constitutional duty to be able to bear arms and protect ourselves, our family, our friends, our loved ones, our property from.
Well, before you ruin my last question, because you're getting really close to it already, let me spit it out here, and then we can wrap this up and you can get ready for bed and get up for work in the morning. It's real simple. It's cut and dry. Do you support the Second Amendment? Absolutely. Or are you the I support the Second Amendment but kind of guy?
Absolutely. I would if I could say it in my own terms, it would be effing-lutely, but I know we're going to keep it clean. So, I was shooting when I was 7 years old in Texas. I had
felons with guns.
I had a single 20 gauge breakaway, single shot 20 gauge, and that's what I started hunting dove with. And my dad used to get mad at me because I'd always come back with more dove than him, and he had a 12 gauge, I had a 20 gauge, but I never told him I shot him off the power lines. I never told him that.
How do you feel about felons with guns?
Depends. All right. It depends on the crime. If it's a violent crime against another human being, I unless I can be persuaded, I don't see that ever happening. But if you're a felon of a non-violent crime, I think once that you You've done your time, you've done your sentence, you've done your parole, and you haven't violated. You should get all of your rights back, and we can remove.
I think that we should reform the criminal justice system to a point to where if you're a violent criminal that has been so violently heinous to society that we can't trust you to give your gun back, then you don't get to be among us anymore.
Well, see, that's going into the judicial branch, which the executive branch leader.
Yeah, I know. There's limitations, but it's more along the lines of just getting an idea of where your head's at with it. Because the viewers that I have, they're all pretty well diehard gun guys, and we want to make sure that whoever we throw our support by doesn't happen to be one of those guys that's like, oh yeah, I support the Second Amendment, but you should still have to have a permit. Yeah,
no, I want constitutional carry in every state to be exactly the same. I don't want to have to drive from Michigan to Texas and call every state in between to find out what their gun laws are. A gun is a gun, an American is an American, and our right is our right. It should be the same. It should be uniform to be the same in all 50 states.
That felon with a gun question is a loaded question because, there's a lot of mixed emotions on that. Everybody's seen, it's like everything else. Everybody's got an opinion on it, but if you're a constitutional loving, free loving American, you have to recognize at some level, if we're going to let these people out of jail, that there has to be a full path to redemption.
There is, unless you've committed a crime against another person, rape, murder, assault.
Typically murderers don't get out of jail very often. Generally, they stick around in there for quite a while.
And I'll go as far as saying there are some crimes that my staff and I would put corporal punishment back into play. If you shoot up a school, you don't get released from jail.
Corporal punishment, man. You've got to go. You can't be a part of society.
Best case scenario, if you shoot up a school under my presidency, is you take your own life, because our law enforcement officers will be told to go after you.
Right. We don't want a court date on this.
I don't want a court date. And if we're going to do our due diligence and we're going to go through the court system and all that, your punishment is going to be life in prison, if not, put to death.
Well, make America great again. Bring back executions. It's kind of like the old saying, you carry yourself different once you've been punched in the mouth a couple of times. Americans have lost touch with what it's like to be punched in the mouth a couple of times throughout their life.
I think that the death penalty should be in play for those who shoot up schools, for anyone that rapes a woman, anyone that takes children and women into sex trafficking. Those three, right off the top of my head, would be suitable for the death penalty. At
the very least, you're never going to be allowed to rejoin society. So your right to keep and bear arms is moot.
And we're not going to let you become a repeat offender. That is the most offensive thing that I could hear in my life, is he's a repeat offender 7 times over. Why didn't we prosecute him right the first time, where he stayed behind bars? We're not going
to, at the very least, on the second time.
And we're not going to let people, we're not going to arrest you because you beat up someone in the subway and then release you in 45
minutes. You didn't accidentally rape that child. That wasn't an accident. You didn't accidentally do that. You thought that through. You knew exactly what you were doing.
This country needs this country needs a president that's got a backbone and a set of balls that will stand up and tell you like it is. And I've been that guy for 14 months. There have been some tough questions, some tough conversations, and I've given my honest to God answer in every one of them. And you know what? The truth, my mother always told me that sometimes the truth hurts and people just have to accept it. In today's world, the truth is not an option for a lot of people. They're so politically brainwashed that they don't understand the truth when it slaps them in the face. When you rape a child or a woman, or you shoot up a school, you have no reason to be amongst the society in this country. You have no reason to be outside of bars or not to be below the ground.
Oh, and that was my
opinion.
whole point with the statement on the felonies, by revising the criminal justice system just a little bit, you take those heinous violators out of the gene pool altogether. You're not going to be free anymore. So your right to keep and bear arms or free speech or your rights are null and void because you're never leaving the confines of this prison.
Right.
If you can get past the death penalty, if you can somehow convince a jury of your peers to not execute your ass, you're never going to be a part of society again. You're done. You're done. And if we make that known for a decade, that should dramatically decrease the amount of violent crimes in our nation. If they know that they're going to be held accountable, a certain percentage of people out there will stop committing those crimes.
Well, there's no pushback right now. And once the bad guys realize that we are going to push back, I think you'll see a drop in mass shootings. I think you'll see a drop in crime. That's why I encourage people to buy a weapon and carry it on them when they go out and about, because true story. And you probably heard this last year in Indianapolis, there was a guy went into the mall, started shooting up the place, killed 6 people.
It was national news, man. The guy did the 40-yard shot.
There was a bystander that, what was it, a 9 or a 45?
Yeah, it was a Smith & Wesson 9mm. He hit a 40-yard shot.
The target, and how many lives did he save?
Oh, countless numbers of lives. I mean, how many people were in the food court? That's how many that he potentially saved.
And that's what we need. I'm not saying we got to go back to the Western days, but we got to get to a point where the bad people
maybe we do
realize
maybe
that
we do need to go back to the Western days where every bad guy in the country, where every single man, woman, and child in the nation realizes that if you do something foolish, you're absolutely putting your life in danger because everybody in the room's packing.
Yeah. Well, that's how we protect ourselves and we protect each other. And when we get to that point, I think we'll see a lot of change as far as the criminal side, the law and order side in this country. We have to uphold the law. No one is above the law in this country. And I'm not going to name names. Just hear me out. No one is above the law in this country.
Hunter.
And that includes Joe Biden.
Hunter.
Even as president, I would exonerate myself from being what do they call it? I would not have immunity. The president of the United States has immunity while he's in office. Period. You can't charge the president with a crime. Joe Biden has done the same thing as Donnie's done, and Donnie's in court forever. Joe is still sitting over there trying to pick his nose and figure out what he's going to do about Israel. You got to hold them accountable. Everyone. And if I'm sitting in that Oval Office and I do something wrong, I want the American people to hold me accountable for my actions because I'm holding them accountable for theirs.
Well, that's one of my biggest beefs is that nobody ever goes to jail. Nobody's ever held accountable. Not Hillary, not Bill, not Don, not Hunter. None of them. I mean, all the way back to, I guess Oliver North was the last guy to really fall on the sword for anyone and get any kind of real punishment out of anything. I can't think of anybody that's actually, I guess except for Jeffrey Epstein, and we all know he didn't kill himself.
No, he didn't. And that's a book that I plan on exposing as soon as I can get my hands on it.
I mean, it couldn't have happened to a nicer guy, but.
Well, I think we ought to know. I think the people ought to know who's on that list. Because
I agree.
I know Trump was on that plane on that island, and I know that there were other politicians that are currently in office that have been out there, and we expose that list, and anyone that's on it, you're losing your seat.
I honestly think, though, Anthony, at this point, even if you could produce a genuine list, that there's been so much disinformation and propaganda spread about that list that you would have a bulk of the population that would just discredit it automatically as just being more.
But that's that population that can't handle the truth. They have their own theories up here. They just can't process somebody being right and making them understand that they're wrong. They can't do it. Those narcissistic.
They do get mad when you point out how bad Orange Man is.
Oh, I know. I know.
Well,
I get targeted on that stuff all the time, but I'm going to stand my ground.
okay. And
People said to
viewers, don't get me wrong. Don't get me wrong. I voted for the man twice. Don't get all hateful in the emails.
I did too, but I tell you what, there's been a lot of people say Trump for president, Hudson for vice president. And I said, no, I don't want to work with that man. Everyone that's worked with that man has been indicted. I don't want to work with him. I mean, that's the truth.
He's not wrong, guys. Everybody that's been in Trump's circle has been indicted. Just
that whole Georgia thing, there was like 19, including Rudy Giuliani, that were indicted. I don't want to work with the man. I don't want nothing to do with the man. I want him to shut up and go live his life on a farm somewhere in Italy and just be quiet, because he gets himself in trouble every time he opens his mouth. He's in court and he's talking about how bad the judge is. Just shut up, Donald. You're a smart man. You did a lot of great things for this country, but you spent $4 trillion. Just shut up.
Well, spending money seems to be the cool thing to do now. I mean, it's easy to do when it's not your money. I mean, you've got a cash machine over here that just keeps spitting out fresh stacks of hundreds. It never shuts off. It always keeps going.
That's why Kevin Duncan, he's been making comments up here. His job, once I get into office, is to go unplug that freaking machine. We're going to unplug
it's so frustrating. It's so absolutely frustrating. That's why I was a fan of Ron Paul. When Ron Paul was going to run for president, I truly did believe that Ron Paul would unplug the printing press. Now with Ron Paul would have came a great time of change, and it would have probably been pretty painful for the average American for a little while the economy was resetting itself. But once the economy did finally correct itself, we Americans would have been off to the races to genuinely be able to earn the American dream again. And, nobody really wants that, because there's suffering involved in getting there.
Right.
To get the currency back on the gold standard, there's going to be some growing pains that come along with that. It's not going to be like, okay, everything's cool. Right. I mean, there's that ripple effect. Throw a rock in the pond and see how far the ripples go out. I mean, it'll have a ripple effect.
They're going to have to hit that proverbial brick wall and know that when they stand up, they're going to be better for it. It's not going to knock them down, and they're going to stay down. And that's one of our biggest challenges, is to fix this country. We have got to have people in office that can make the hard decision, knowing it's what's best for the people. It's what's going to help relieve the stress in all of our lives, release the struggles that we're going through, and allow us to be happier. If we're happier, we won't have mass shootings. Whatever happened to just saying good morning to a stranger at Starbucks or at the gas station?
We did have a question. We did have a question from one of the viewers, but I already know the answer to it. He asked how many pipelines you would allow to come from Alberta, Canada. And I already know the answer, Alberta, all of them. He's all about creating energy independence. If it's going to benefit the United States, then he's all for it when it comes to energy sources.
Yeah, our slogan is people before politics. And we believe that should be a lifestyle, not a slogan. And to make that a lifestyle, we have to implement policies that are against government and for the people. We have to reduce the size of government so that the people can control the government the way they're supposed to. And that means getting rid of the 3-letter agencies, the Department of Education, the IRS, the DOJ, part of the FBI, the CIA, and start empowering the U.S. Marshals and start empowering local law enforcement by allowing them to do their job without a camera being over their head all the time. That's why cops are so scared to do their job, because everyone and anyone is watching. So what? Do your job. Let the law protect you as an officer, but you got to do your job according to the law. You don't get to go out and kill someone and think you're protected because you're an officer, because if you're not, if you violated the law if that was a non-justifiable homicide, you're going to go to jail. You're going to lose your badge. You're going to go to jail. Period.
All right, Anthony. Well, we've hit the 1 hour mark over here, and I actually got to go pick my daughter up from her job. She gets off work 3 minutes ago. So we're going to go ahead and wrap this thing up. I truly, truly do appreciate you coming on to the show. I hope that we reach a lot of people with your message, and I wish you all the best on your campaign trails. If there's anything else that you can think of that Therapy Range can do to help you out, you know how to get a hold of me.
Yep.
If you've got anything left to say, I got 30 seconds for you.
30 seconds. I just want to direct people to our website, AnthonyHudson2K24.com. We've been asking people all over the country to donate $1 or $2 or 50 cents if you have it, because this is a grassroots campaign and every penny helps. And if you want to make a contribution to our campaign to keep us out on the road, PayPal, Cash App, and Venmo are all at Hudson2K24. We appreciate you guys for coming in and listening, and I hope that we can see you in your town soon, because we're going to be hitting the road again starting next week. So we appreciate it.
All right, guys. Well, thanks again for everybody that tuned in. Be sure to live your lives to the fullest, because anything less is an injustice to yourself and every single person around you. I'm Paul Riley. That's Anthony Hudson. He's running for president. Share the video. Do all the other Facebook, YouTube, Rumble, Mumbo, Jumbo. Stay free, America. If you can.
All right, here we go.
I got a baby blown over with a demon inside, yeah.
Mad Tech Industries, the official Cerakoter